If you enjoy hearing these eerie tales and want more to help you drift off or keep you up at night, don't forget to tap the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Recent true highway story. I'm a 32-year-old female, and this is something that happened to me only 2 nights ago. My husband Kevin and I were on the porch smoking a cigarette. It was about 9 o'clock at night. We live in far out the woods, right off of a stretch of highway that's between 2 interstate exits. We were looking up at the stars, enjoying the quiet atmosphere of the crickets, glad to have a temporary relief from all of the usual traffic noise. I heard something and shushed my husband, even though he hadn't said anything. Was that screaming? Yes, it was a woman screaming like nothing I had ever heard before. It sounded like she was getting murdered. In between blood-chilling screams, she was screaming out, "Help me! Help me!" I look at my husband. We were both really freaked out. The more she screamed, the closer she was getting to the house. I could eventually see a figure running along the median of the highway, making their way closer to the part of highway that was in front of our house. Our house is a good ways back from our driveway, but not far enough that you can't see anything. If we could see her, that meant that she could see us. We have no yard security lights, stupid I know, so we were in complete darkness. We could still see the highway perfectly fine due to the house across from us who still had their Christmas lights up. I threw my cig in my yard and back up to stand in the doorway of the house, pulling out my phone to call 911. She is still in the median of the road screaming. If anyone else in the surrounding houses heard her, they pretended like they didn't. Kevin runs past me inside to get on his jacket and shoes. I tell him not to go out there, but he ignores me and gets dressed anyway. As soon as he is out of sight, I see a red car barrel up the road and pull over next to where the lady was at. With her in the median, there was still a stretch of highway between them. There was a man driving. I couldn't see what he looked like. I only heard his voice. He was yelling that he was going to kill her and calling her a bitch. It looked like he was throwing stuff at her out of the window. Maybe clothes? As soon as she sees him pull over, she starts running straight towards our yard. By that time, I was already on the phone with the police officers, but as I said, I live out in the woods. Pretty far out of town, I'll add, so it would take them a bit to get there. I yell for my husband. I tell my 9-year-old son to go in our room where the baby is and close the door. He can hear the whole thing and was pretty frightened. My husband runs out onto the porch and into the yard towards her. He asks if she's okay, and she says that she had gotten a ride home from this guy, and halfway down the road, he started acting really creepy. He refused to let her out where she told him to and kept driving with her in the car. She looked behind her seat, pretending to look at a car behind them, and saw a roll of duct tape. Fearing for her life, she jumped out of the moving car and just started running down the road, screaming for help. Kevin starts to lead her towards the house and by now is also on the phone calling the police, having gathered more information that I wasn't able to give them when I had called. They told him to stay on the line with them until an officer showed up. He lets her in the house, and her face looks terrible. She is red and bleeding in a couple of spots, road rash from when she had jumped out. She also said that he had hit her before she was able to escape. She came in, and we locked our door, knob, deadbolt, and chain. We stood together near the window waiting for the police to show up, Kevin giving updates and answering questions on the phone. No, they haven't gotten here yet. Yes, his car is still parked across the highway. It's a red sedan in front of a house with lots of blue porch Christmas lights, he told them. I was trying not to lose my shit when there was a loud bang on our door. The man was yelling, "I know you're in there! I saw you running! The people in there can't protect you!" I shouted through the door that he needed to leave our property, and if he was smart, get in his car and drive off. I told him we were on the phone with the police. The answer he gave was the worst one I could ever hear. He says, "Go ahead, call the police." I don't care. They won't be here in time. Bang, bang, bang on the door over and over. The woman was freaking out and crying, saying, "Help me. Please help me," over and over again. I ran to the kitchen to get a large knife just in case. We had a huge, solid iron door, but our windows were easily breakable. If he wanted to get in badly enough, he certainly could. My husband just came from our bedroom with his gun when a squad car pulled up in the yard, 2 more following behind it and 1 across the street where his car was. He took off on foot running. They tended to the woman and got her home safely. Turns out she lives on the across the highway from us 5 houses to the left. It had been 2 hours later, and they still hadn't found him. There are a lot of places to hide in these woods. I just hope he hides far away from here. I don't think my wife is asleep. 2:49 a.m. I lie awake in bed laying on my right side. My wife is behind me. She's awake, I can tell. I can feel her staring at me from behind. She's always been a night owl, but tonight feels different. She feels wrong. She's breathing heavy, I should check on her, but for the life of me I cannot bring myself to turn around. 3:03 a.m. I can feel her moving closer to me. She moves ever so slightly, and I can feel her touch the back of my hair. Is she caressing me? The hairs on my neck are standing up. Why is her hand so cold? I can see the door to my room through the darkness. My entire body just wants to jump up and run to it. I can't do that. I'm being silly. 3:13 a.m. She's right behind me. I can smell her breath. It's horrible. I've never smelled her like this before. I can feel something pressing into my back. Is it a knife? It doesn't feel sharp. I gotta do something. I decide to jump up and turn the light on, but right before I do, the hall light turns on. I can hear my wife coming up the stairs. She's on the phone with her mom. I can hear her crying. Apparently her grandpa died earlier today. He never liked me. Maybe that's why he decided to pay me a visit tonight. Horrifying experience during quarantine. I was upstairs in my room one night playing video games with the volume really loud when I thought I heard noises coming from downstairs. I muted the TV and listened closer. Nothing. I resumed playing the game for another hour when I heard it again, only louder. I was sure I heard it this time, and was a little freaked out. To assure myself, I went downstairs to the basement where I thought I heard the noise coming from. As soon as I opened the basement door, I was hit with a cold breeze. I went downstairs and saw the window wide open. I was 100% sure I had closed and locked all the windows in the house. I was ready to make a run for it when something stopped me. I turned around and for the first time noticed the closet door was slightly cracked open. I stood for what seemed like 30 minutes in front of that door debating whether I should open it. I moved closer and put my hand on the doorknob. All of a sudden I heard a creepy crackle coming from inside the closet. I have never run faster up a flight of stairs before. I locked the door and called the cops, who had an unusually fast response time. They came in and searched the house, and not even 5 minutes into their search I heard a gunshot from downstairs. A few minutes later they came out with a deranged-looking man, probably homeless. They put him in the back of the car and told me they had opened the door and the man was holding a gunshot at them and missed. He luckily missed, and the cops disarmed him and arrested him. The scariest part was how close I was to opening that door and likely being murdered. There she was. True story. I was around 5 or 6 at this time, and we were moving to a different province. We didn't have a place yet, so we were staying at a nearby shelter while looking for one. I forget where the shelter was, but we were told it had been transformed into a shelter after someone decided to make use of the abandoned building. We were told it was half of an institution or something years and years before I was even born. Anyway, we had a strange room. I'd say it was about 8 by 9 foot room, with a heavy metal door and 2 bunk beds, one on either side of the room. The bunk beds had metal framing and seemed a tad bit unstable, and the mattresses were hard, and the floor was concrete and not even a tiny window. But we didn't complain because it was temporary. We were the only ones living in a room on that floor. I remember very vividly that my siblings and mother were in the kitchen preparing the food for the shelter as it was their turn. That was part of the agreement to stay there. Plus, there were at least 40 other people. It was 2 to 3 floors and had a basement. I remember going to bed early because I was really tired, so my mom opened the heavy door and let me in the room, turned on the light, and waited for me to climb the ladder to the top of the bed before saying, "Good night." She then turned the light off and I snuggled in the blankets, but I couldn't fall asleep, so I stared at the ceiling. I don't know how much time had passed, but I then heard the bunk bed on the other side of the room creak, as if someone was climbing up the ladder on that bunk bed, right across from mine. And since my older brother was the one who slept there, I spoke thinking it was him, and he somehow quietly snuck in the room to not wake me up. So when I heard the creaking stop, indicating someone was on the mattress across from me, I said, "Hey Aiden, you didn't have to sneak in. I can't fall asleep." Only to get no response. This was unusual for him, since he'd usually say something right away, either to tease me or help me sleep, however. I got no response, just the sound of the sheets rustling a tiny bit. I assumed he didn't hear me, so I spoke louder. "Hi, Aiden. Did you guys finish the food yet?" No response. To this, I became a little bit worried that something had him upset, so I sat up and turned my head towards the bed, hoping that I would be able to comfort him if he was upset. I barely got his name out of my mouth when I had realized it wasn't him, but a dark figure, some girl around my age at the time. She had 2 braids and a puffy old-fashioned dress. She had been sitting crisscross, staring and pointing in my direction. I of course got so scared I couldn't scream, thinking if I did I'd be harmed in some way, so I stayed quiet and hid under my blankets. A few hours later, my mom comes in and turns on the light, with my siblings behind her. I seen the light on, so I automatically assumed someone was in the room and I was safe, so I shot up out of under my blankets and quickly climbed down the ladder and hugged my mom. She asked me what was wrong, since I was still shaking. But me, thinking that that girl was still in the room, waited till the next day when we went for our morning walk, to explain to her what had happened. After explaining what happened, how I couldn't sleep, and heard someone go on the bunk bed across from me thinking it was my older brother, and then seeing the girl with braids and a puffy dress that was just a pitch-black figure. My mom was horrified, but just to be sure it wasn't my imagination, she went asking people in the shelter about a supposed ghost, giving no details about what I had told her. This lady, we'll call her Courtney, told my mom, "Yes, there is a spirit roaming. It takes the form of a girl and has 2 braids and an old-fashioned dress. She used to visit me every night but suddenly stopped when you guys moved in. We were the only children in the shelter, so that might have been the reason? I don't know." My mom replied to Courtney, "Well, my daughter seen someone with the exact description you had given me, and at first I thought it was just her imagination, or something like that." Anyway, Courtney then walked away. Things were pretty quiet after that. I seen something run in the corner of my eye every once in a while, or hear the sound of knives sharpening when no one was in the kitchen, and the occasional sounds of screaming from the basement when no one was down there. However, it was a family room you could book. One day our family had booked it. There were kids' toys, colored maps, wooden tiled floors, and a TV. We were watching Land Before Time, and I looked on the dark side of the room, in curiosity. And there she was, standing in the middle of the dark side of the basement. She ran around the corner. The basement was in a L shape, and we were using half of the L side off it. Anyway, at this point I'm more curious about her than afraid. I kind of thought she wanted to play since she was in the toy section of the room, so I followed her. Thinking it was a game of hide and seek, I stood up from the couch without a word, and my mom asked me where I was going, but I didn't answer, and just walked into the dark side of the room, which to her was strange, since I had a fear of the dark back then, as most kids do. She was confused why I would go into the darkest side of the basement, where light didn't reach willingly. She followed me, and I entered a dark closet. I started looking around frantically and kept asking, "Where are you? Don't you want to play with me? Is that why you keep running around me?" I asked over and over, questions along those lines. My mom obviously was concerned, turned on the lights, picked me up, turned off the TV, and brought me and my siblings upstairs. She asked why I was acting the way I was, and according to her I said, "She wants to play." After that, Ma and the rest of my family started getting scratches and tiny bruises mysteriously. Within a week, my mom found a place, and we moved there, leaving our toys and stuff behind, believing the spirit could have possessed them to follow us. We only kept a few clothes, money, food, and hides. We bought new stuff at the store, and lived on the other side of town from the shelter. The Suicide Man. Trigger warning. This was my most recent terrifying nightmare. I've had many, but this one was really different from the rest. So for some backstory, when I was a little kid I lived in Miami. From the stories I've heard, the neighborhood I lived in was the Hood. When I was about 5 years old, we left. So now into the dream, or should I say nightmare. My parents decided that we were going to visit our old house in that neighborhood in Miami. When we got there, we noticed it was blocked from the rest of the city with a tall metal gate going around the whole neighborhood. The gate didn't have an opening. Instead, it led to a small hallway kind of thing. For some reason, a kid from my current school was now there waiting at the gate with me and my family. So we got inside the neighborhood and it was run down and broken. Fast forward a few hours in the dream, my fam and friend found my childhood house and decided to check it out. My brother went in his room, my parents in theirs, and my friend, my sister and I were chilling in the living room. We were standing there for a few minutes when my little sister said something stupid to my friend, like something a 5-year-old would say. I can't really remember. He got pissed and turned to me and said he was going to hit her. He then proceeded to go into another room to get a golf club. I tried calming him down and calling my parent, but no one listened. In an effort to protect my sister, I took like 3 hits with the club. After a few more hits, he picked up my sister and bit her on the neck. I tackled him to the ground still with my sister in his jaws. Blood everywhere. I tried to punch him, but it didn't do crap, but I kept trying. Few more seconds and I stared jabbing a stick into his ribcage, but nothing was working. The cops came and took him away. The look in his eyes were unforgettable. I've never seen so much hate in someone's eyes. We stayed in that house for years. I was watching the news one day on the TV that just appeared in the house. It said that my friend went crazy in prison and stayed in his cell for days, never touching light, and that he carved a smile into his face. At the end of the broadcast, it said that he went missing from his cell a few days ago. I broke down because I knew he was coming for me. I grabbed a knife and tried to kill myself. Before I got the chance, I looked behind me, and there he was, bleached white skin, wearing all black, and with a bloody smile on his face. He aggressively yelled, "Suicide," and slit my throat. That was one of the most vivid nightmares I've ever had. It was trippy seeing that same friend at school the next day. The closest thing I could find to the look in his eyes in that nightmare was a picture of Jeff the Killer. But you probably won't find it. And strange experience I had a few months ago. I'm not sure what this would fall under, but it definitely was the strangest experience I've had in years. I work a night shift for a warehouse, won't say which since it's not important to the story, only that I was coming home around 3 a.m. Now I'm out in the country where my home is in the hills and it's about half a mile from the main road. About halfway up the nice smooth road turns to dirt. As my wheels hit the dirt, I felt eyes watching me almost immediately. Which normally I wouldn't care because it's normal to see wildlife watching me come up the road. Only as I got to my normal parking spot, I grabbed my pocket knife I keep in the glove box and stepped out. My eyes immediately turned to the direction of a dark patch of woods on the other side of the road. Something told me to look there, and I held my knife up calmly, saying, "I know you're there." As the words left my lips, the world went dead quiet, which is very strange as there is a waterfall maybe 500 to 600 feet away from me, and I can always hear it when I come home. But even it went silent. It stayed like this for a good 10 seconds before the sound returned, and I heard something running away from me. I just kept my knife to my side and walked like I normally would to the house, as I felt like running would have been a bad idea. As I got in, I saw the dogs that normally greeted me weren't anywhere in sight, and they were in the living room, both looking out the window in the same direction I felt the gaze something from. I didn't say anything to my fiancée as she was asleep, and she doesn't have a belief in the paranormal as I do, coming from my Mapuche heritage, South American Indian tribe. I grew up on stories from my dad and had heard the Native American stories of Wendigo, skinwalkers, and other spirits creatures, but since that night I've never felt that same presence. No idea what it could have been, I just know it wasn't deer like I'd normally see around my home. The crows. My best friend told this story to me a few days ago. This is from his point of view. Most people wouldn't consider crows as the most comforting birds. Well, they aren't most elegant of birds anyhow. Also, most people doesn't like their loud crying either. But to me and my wife, they are our lifesavers and protectors. I wasn't always fond of these birds either. But sometimes life finds ways to change your opinion. Me and my wife are both from the same small hillside town. People were mainly farmers. They were hardworking and many would say very generous. My high school sweetheart, my wife, and I were both 16 at that time. Farmers in the area decided to cut down the large banyan tree near the town cemetery. They wanted to chase away the crows, which lived in it, because these crows would often eat the crops and steal eggs. Sometime they would even raid kitchens. I was very glad at this news when I heard it. I was always irritated by the constant crowing sound, so to me the fact that people are trying to chase them away was a relief. But this was not the case for my girlfriend. They are just hungry, that's all. Sure, they would eat some of the crops, but do they even have to make such rash decision? This was her reaction to when she heard that the tree was going to be cut down. She's been like that as long as I could remember. She had sympathy and love for all living things, including the crows. Whenever we had time to sneak out behind our parents' back and have a little alone time, she would often bring breadcrumbs with her. She would feed them to the crows and other birds. I never really liked her doing that, but didn't say anything because I didn't want to upset her. But as I recall, many considered the tall banyan tree which spread over the creepy-looking cemetery, and the ocean of crows nested it as a bad omen. Only 2 people were objected about cutting it down. One was my girlfriend, other was an old man who lived near the cemetery. He was furious about them cutting the tree. But nobody listened to him, and they decided to go down with it. I still remember that day when they cut it down. They bursted firecrackers to scare the crows away. Then they cut down the large branches one by one, and finally entire tree. While cutting it down, a large section of the tree fell down and broke the wall guarding the cemetery. People didn't mind it that much as graves were fine. Without their home, the crows flew away, leaving some broken eggs and nests along with many dead hatchlings. As one of the mob, I was glad that they decided to chase those annoying birds away from our tiny town. As I was leaving, I saw someone untying the old man, who protested against cutting the tree down. The mob had tied him up before so he wouldn't cause a scene. I felt bad for him. He shouldn't have had such a harsh treatment. You fools, you doomed us all. He kept mumbling the same words over and again, sobbing and laughing manically. Over the next few days, I began to feel that something was different. Village was getting more and more silent. Birds weren't chirping anymore. Even the wind was getting silent. Something is wrong. I feeling scared. My girlfriend began to complain to me. Though I would console her, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling I had. 2 weeks passed. I was going back home after I walked my girlfriend to her house. I began to do it a few days ago since she said she was afraid to walk home alone. My home was just beyond the cemetery. As it was evening and darkness comes early in the hills, I began to walk faster. When I was about to pass the cemetery, suddenly I saw something. The old man was running away from there, bleeding. He had an axe on his left hand. He collapsed at his doorstep. I rushed to his aid. Baba, what happened to you? Who did this? I asked him. He began to softly moan. Kill me now, boy, kill me. I thought he was crazy and was begun to rise up to call an ambulance. Then suddenly, he risen up and pulled me down with monstrous strength and roared, "Listen to me, boy!" I was scared. What do he wanted with, I asked. Listen, they are coming, and there's no way to stop them all, he mumbled. I asked him who was coming, to which he replied, the dead. I still didn't have a clue, which made him angrier, but he calmed down and asked me to listen. He said, "There's something evil lives in this land. This evil don't let the dead move on, but instead twists their souls with jealousy and resentment towards the living. The dead wants to prey on the living and make them join their ranks. They are going to come out any minute now. The only thing they feared is gone." I asked what thing. He spoke while blood drooling from his mouth. "Them crows. They feared the crows in that tree. You must be wondering why I didn't tell anyone about it. Because they think I'm crazy. I lost count how many times I tried to convince people to leave this town, but none listened. It's as if that evil wants them to stay here. I noticed people from this town are always pulled back to here, all laid to rest here. But because of the crows, they stayed dormant. Now that we cut the tree down, there's nothing to stop them. I was attacked by one of them. Please cut off my head now. I don't want to join them. Plas. Those were his last words as he succumbed to his wounds. I could clearly saw he wasn't lying. His body was getting darker and foul-smelling. When I saw his hands began to twitch, I took the axe and carried out his last wish. The sun was almost gone. I wanted to save my family. As I was running, I could hear tombstones moving in the cemetery. When I reached home, the door was open. There were no lights. I called for my parents, but none responded. So I somehow went to the hall and flicked the light switch. There I saw my mother, laying dead on the floor while father was eating her mangled corpse. I wanted to cry, but bit my tongue and stopped. I slowly backed away from there, as his attention was not on me. I quickly got out of the house. I could hear moans from our neighbors and loud screams. I realized that my girlfriend was in danger too. I ran through the plantations to get to her house. I could hear more and more people running for their life. I chopped some dead, who ran towards me. I had one mission then, and none was stopping me. When I reached her home, the door was locked. "Help me, someone. Please. Mom, Dad, don't hurt me." I heard cries. I was relived to know she was okay, but she was in grave danger. I broke the door with the axe, and hearing it, those things who used to be her parents rushed outside. I strike them down, hiding beside the door. When I was sure that they won't get up, I began to call her. "Anita, come out, it's me." "Zerina." I heard the door upstairs open and she ran towards me sobbing. "Mom and Dad, something is wrong with them. They tried to attack me." She was crying. I asked her if she was all right, and she said she was fine. I told her that we are going to get out through the back door. I didn't want her to see her parents. I decided it's best to get out of town through the main road. Wind was rustling. It was going to rain soon. We slowly moved behind the building and hedges, avoiding getting spotted. Suddenly we heard another inhuman roar behind us. They spotted us and they were hungry. We ran for our lives. I lost my axe while running. While we are crossing the cemetery suddenly, Anita face down. Looking back, I saw a legless corpse clutching down her ankles. I kicked it head off, loosening its grip. She tried walk, but her ankles were sprained. I had to carry her and run. It had started to rain heavily. We were both drenched and my legs were getting tired. We were almost out of the town. Then suddenly, they trapped us in a circle from all sides. With no way to escape, I told her to close her eyes. I prayed for a swift death, though I know it won't be one. As I waited to be killed by the monsters, who were once our family, friends, and loved ones. Suddenly, I heard a crowing sound. I saw a crow was sitting on a nearby tree. Its eyes were glowing like embers. Seeing that crow, they halted at their tracks. Then suddenly lightning struck, lighting up the dark sky. I saw a whole army of crows circling us in the sky, with fiery red eyes. Suddenly, one of them made a loud, "Craw-wow" sound, and all others began to do the same. Their cries began shroud the rain itself. Then all of a sudden, they began come down attacking the undead. Some of them began fly around us like in a circle. I used this chance and began to run. We finally were about to make it to downhill. Suddenly I saw lightning hit the top of the hill. Earth began to shake. Anita said that it's a landslide before we even could react. Mud and water swept us away. When we woke up, we were both in the hospital, pretty badly hurt, but alive. The police constable who came to take our statement said the entire town was swept away by the landslide. They couldn't even find any bodies till now. I asked them how did they find us. He said, "Rescue team were searching for dead bodies, then suddenly they saw crows circling in the sky and thought that there must be dead bodies. They came and found 2 of you, unconscious and covered in mud, barely alive." We both decided not to tell what happened to anyone. We were the only survivors in a town full of 300 families. We both knew why they couldn't find any bodies, because they aren't truly dead anyway. Once we left the hospital, we were separated for a while. She was sent to a girls' orphanage and girls' school ran by the government, and I was sent to a care home for boys, since I was still limping from the accident. We kept in touch through letters. Once we were both working, we married and had 2 children. Our old hometown has since been taken over by the forest. Government prohibited resettlement plans there because of the risk of another landslide. But that place still has a grip on us. Sometimes we would both hear something in back of our mind telling us to go back, be home. Why wouldn't you visit your family? These voices are often followed crows, crowing in the yard, to wake us up from the trance, remembering us of the horrors, protecting us from the vanishing girl. So my name is Max. I'm currently 15, and this story happened to me at the age of 11 or 12. I can't remember the age too clearly. My friends and I love to explore, and any chance we can explore, we go do it. Here are the characters in my story. Max. Me. Bren, a close friends. Nick, a best friend that always explored with me. The vanishing girl, the antagonist of this story. I wasn't actually at my house this time of the story. I was at my best friend's house, aka Nick, and we were extremely excited to explore a creek near his place. We have explored this place multiple times, and every time we find something new. This was the 3rd time something creepy happened at the creek. We have had a man chase us through the tunnel, and a cult that owned the creek that we had an encounter with. If you want me to tell you guys those stories, they are short and I'll tell them later. Nick and I explore this place a lot with a few other friends, but only one could tag along for this trip. This friend's name was Bren, and he was a chill kid. Bren was the oldest in the group, being about 14 at the time, and was kind of like the leader, even though none of us listened to him. We tried to get more people to join us, but after other experiences at the creek, they were too creeped out to join us. We all got out gear, a few snacks and a pocket knife or 2, and readied ourselves for the adventure awaiting us. The walk was about a 1/4 of a mile and was really easy for our energetic child minds, so we cleared that walk really easily. There is a pretty long path of woods to get down to the actual creek, and it's really awesome to walk it in the sunlight, as long as you don't hit any spiders. After about an hour, we approached the entrance of the creek. This creek is also a national park, so we could walk it without worry of trespassing, like that stops us anyway. We entered the creek side where there was a staircase waiting for use to go down. We wandered down the staircase doing what every kid does and skipping a few steps. I end up falling because if the jumping and we all have a good laugh, all of us reach the bottom and splash around in the cold creek water. It was amazing. I loved every second of the adventure. After about 20 minutes of splashing and just messing around, my best friend Nick tells us he knows a cool area. Of course, being kids, we all followed him, and Nick wasn't incorrect, it was a beautiful area. It had a bunch of crawdaddies and a pretty deep area that us short kids could swim in. We spent at least 2 hours enjoying the great area and hanging out having fun. Eventually the sun dips below the horizon and we had to go. Nick's mom doesn't let us stay out late. We adventured to the staircase, somewhat scurrying up the stairs, about 100 steps. The group got to the trail that takes us to the street. A bunch of stupid kids wander down the path till we reach the end. We leave and get to the street, and then I turn around to see a woman. This woman has never been seen before from anyone in the group. She has a knife in hand and she is about middle ages with a nightgown on. She was about 200 yards away from us and I was worried. I tell my friends and then turn around somehow like the cliche horror movie scenes, she is gone. The group believes me and we all run home. A bunch of little kids running from a ghost. Or is it? We all sit home and wonder what happened. I'll continue the story later if you guys want. The Vanishing Girl PT2. So the last bit of the vanishing girl I decided to not tell because I didn't have time to type it out. Now I will continue. So after we saw the girl at the creek, my friends and I ran home. A white van kept following us, and then the headlights would vanish when we turned back. It was some truly creepy shit. It took us forever to get home because we kept taking back roads to try and hide from this ghost car. After everyone got home, we sat down and talked about the day. It was only Nick and I in the house, and Bren had to go to his own house. After a while, Nick and I go to sleep, but little did I know Nick fell asleep with a story to tell. As we got up and wandered back outside to meet with Bren, we were surprised to see Bren was already at our front door. We asked him what happened, and he spoke. Something was outside my window and wouldn't stop knocking and scratching at it, trying to get in. We were all thoroughly freaked out, and we believe him. The belief faded after we looked at his window to see no visible markings. Although we didn't see any marks, I still believed him because of his utter fear you could see on his face. After about an hour, we all sit down to speak about what happened the night earlier. Nick and Bren both knew what I saw, but they didn't tell me till later. They spoke to me about how they saw a little girl that looked just like the one I described in the first part of this story get hit by a white van. Kinda creepy, I know, but it gets worse. After the girl gets hit, the entire scene vanished in front of their eyes. What? How? I asked. No one to this day believes what we saw, but I don't need people to. The group knows what we saw, and we are constantly searching for the girl to get our questions answered. Thank you for reading. If you want more Creek stories or just some of my scary stories, comment down below, and I hope you all have a great day. Found this story on Facebook. Country lanes in the UK are pretty narrow and have lots of blind bends. I was driving down a lane and there was a cyclist in front of me, in the middle of the road, not wearing a helmet, and heading toward a completely blind bend. I suddenly thought, if a car swings around that bend, they are going to smash into the cyclist and pin him to my car. It was like a Final Destination vision. I couldn't hear or see another car, but I saw this accident so vividly in my mind. I immediately slammed on my brakes, honked my horn, and pulled over. The poor cyclist guy shat himself and stumbled to the hedges. Mere seconds later, some idiotic teenager comes speeding out of the blind corner and missed us by inches. If we were still in the road, this guy would have plowed straight through the cyclist and into my car. I completely freaked out, to the point the cyclist came over to calm me down. I don't remember much, but I know I was saying "you were dead" over and over again. I'm not a religious person at all, but that's the closest I've come to believing in some kind of divine intervention. A story nobody believes. This happened like 15 years ago. It was school holidays and my friend, we'll call her Sarah, and I were extremely bored and just wanted to chill. This was summertime. We lived in a small town called New Braunfels in Texas. Everything kind of spread out. Anyways, it was around midnight and we didn't know where to go, so we just decided to go to the park. It's a little big. We were there for an hour or so. Nothing unusual. Until we both saw someone or something crouched on a table. First off, a little weird someone else being in the same park at this time. But what's creepy AF is that this person was crouching on top of a fucking table. He wasn't even sitting on the bench. What really fucked me up was, because I didn't look away, I kept looking closer. I noticed that there were wings. The body was completely human, but had fucking wings. The part that I'll never forget. All of a sudden, the most blood-curdling scream, like a woman being stabbed to death. But it sounded like a woman but unhuman at the same time. Like a scream that a normal person doesn't do, but a scream animals can't even make. Almost like those screams in a movie that a demon or something makes. Then it just stands up, and this fucker has to be 8 feet tall, minimum. We both ran as fast as we could. Have you ever ran to your lungs' max capacity? I ran until I had no air left in my lungs, and then kept running until I had to slow down because I was coughing too much. We knocked on PPL's doors and kept getting threatened that they have guns and will shoot if we don't leave. We were literally locked outside with this thing. I kept looking into the sky because this reminded me of Jeepers Creepers the movie. After maybe 20 minutes, The police show up and, of course, think we're on drugs, but wanted to let us go. I walked the rest because I lived a few blocks away. The police drove my friend home. There was a white cop and a Mexican cop. When the Mexican cop heard the story, he pretended like it's just made up, but the look on his face said he knows something about this thing that nobody knows. I have PTSD now and hate going outside alone at night, especially near parks or the woods. Weird PPL don't really scare cops. Animals don't really scare cops. But you know it was something much worse if a cop lies and can't keep a straight face because of fear. Like I said, it's a story that happened and I remember clear as day. But a story nobody believes. Tried making it as short as possible. My old house. Okay, so I used to live in this old house from about years 7 to 10 old. So this happened a while ago. But when me and my family, mom and twin sisters, both 4 at the time, moved, there was something kidna off about it. There was always this sense of dread there, and the type that will make you feel like you being watched. But the most creepiest part of the house was this small closet underneath our stairs going down to the basement, where me and my sisters slept. In the 4 years of living there, none of us ever went into there because of how creepy it was, but that's besides the point. The first couple incidents that happened weren't really that big, just things like lights turning on when you thought you turned them off, and doors doing the same thing. But the more messed up stuff started happening. Most nights when I tried to sleep, I always had this sense that someone was watching me in the pitch black, and some nights I couldn't even move. This one night when I was about 8, I couldn't sleep at all, and so I tried to sleep in my mom's bed. I lied awake till about 2 in the morning, until I started to get the feeling. Someone was watching me, and I couldn't move, that was, until I heard my mom's music box start playing. Then I was totally crap, my pants scared, and then when I tried to wake my mom up, it stopped. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Nothing really happened after that. Expect me and my sisters slowly stopped sleeping in our room and started sleeping on the upstairs couch because we were so scared, and eventually my mom had to sell the house because we couldn't pay for it anymore. But on the last night that we were there, and one of my sisters decided that we were going to go into the closet and look behind the corner to just see what was there. And right as we were going around it, the door slammed shut and screamed and ran to the door, pushing one other out of the way, and when we went to tell our family, they didn't believe us. Years later, I learned that the old man that made the house and live in it also died in it to LOL. Shallow waters. Hello, you can call me B27, don't ask why, but when I was younger, less than 7 maybe, 5 or something like that, I remember something strange. It scared me so badly that I almost started to cry, but I couldn't. No tears, just a small, sharp gasp. I was playing in the shallow parts of the waters not because I couldn't swim, but because I was rolling around and playing. My memory is shattered for a number of reasons, so sorry if I don't give too much detail. As I was playing, I started feeling sad and almost weird, unsettling no matter where I sat or stood. After a few minutes of tearing up, I started laughing and playing again. I don't know if what I grabbed that day had anything to do with my emotions, but considering they started acting up before the problem started, it's very possible. I say I'm not sure because I was born with a few mental health problems, but anyways, back to the story. As I was playing, I had rolled around in the water, same spot twice, but the second time around was, well, like I said, if I could at the time. If I could have cried in that moment, I would have. I remember wanting to scream, but nothing. What I had grabbed will make me feel weird for the rest of my life. I had first initially thought it was a mask, but there was grass and skin. It felt like hard bone. My fingers had landed in the eye holes. It was gross. When I moved my arm up, it came with it. Thinking about it now, it looked like some carved the front of a human skull off, then flattened that into a sick mask. I felt scared, confused, and sick all at once. I have had some weird things happen in my life. 1. Run. And if you can't run, then walk. And if you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, don't stop. It's only been an hour since everyone on Earth, as far as I could tell, heard those same words. I was already walking through the park when I heard them, and after seeing what happens, I won't be stopping anytime soon. It's been 2 hours now. I've kept walking. I'm tired, but stopping is not an option. Some people tried driving, but the act of getting in a car requires stopping, even for the briefest moment. And as those already driving when they heard the rules soon found out, it's impossible to move indefinitely in a vehicle, especially in a crowded city. Their screams kept me moving. It's been 4 hours now, and I'm exhausted, with the only thing pushing me forward being the fear of what awaits when I stop. And yes, I mean when, proven by plenty of those around me, eventually I'll have to stop. Some have just given up, accepting contact with me. He had stopped moving. His eyes were bloodshot, and not just whites around his pupils. I mean the entirety of his eyes were crimson red. Black tears streamed down his expressionless face, and then he smiled. A wide, toothy smile that would have screamed of joy if it wasn't followed by animalistic screams that would give the biggest horror fanatic nightmares. I wish I could say witnessing his dying moments was the most horrific thing to happen to me today. But then it hit me, the realization that I had stopped moving. Story 3. My girlfriend talks in her sleep. At first it was cute and hilarious to tell her what she said. It was harmless nonsense. The sky is folding, or we need to raise the ground. We'd talk the next day about if she remembered her dream, but she never did. I wish I knew what she meant by, we need to raise the ground. Some context, our nightly routine is for us to start out cuddling and then give up once it gets too hot. Then we're usually both on our sides, back to back. She would fall asleep before I do, and so I would hear the full range of her nightly musings. Honestly, at first I was eager to hear what she said. It was always funny to tell her and our friends what she would say while deep in the throes of REM. But now I'm done. I'd prefer she not talk anymore. How am I going to sleep after what happened last night? Last night, around 11 p.m., she was asleep, and I was still up reading. Back to back, I hear her mumble something under her breath. I couldn't quite make out what she said, but I lean over from my book to peek at her face, and she is sleeping soundly. I return to my book, get absorbed back into its pages. At some point I fall asleep. Next thing I know, I'm woken up by my girlfriend talking at full volume. I open my eyes, and at some point in the night both of us have turned to lay face to face. My girlfriend's eyes are wide open. She is staring right at me, mere inches from my face. But her eyes are vacuous, like she is looking through me. These eyes, man. It's like she was straining to widen them as much as possible. Those are the eyes I fell in love with, and right now they are scaring the absolute piss out of me. My heart rate skyrockets, and chock full of adrenaline, I throw off the covers and jump out of bed. Looking at her, her eyes follow me like a painting, but her body stays still. For 1 second, I decided that my book light was keeping her awake, and what she had said was, "Can you please turn that off?" Now out of bed and looking at her, she's not right. Her body hasn't moved, but her eyes dart from looking at me to looking around the room. I dare to ask her, "Are you all right?" No response. Those eyes look at me when I speak, though. They are now deadlocked, looking right into my eyes. Her breathing hasn't changed. That is a sleep breathing for sure. That's when, while looking right at me, she says in a too deep voice, "Come back to bed, dearie." My girlfriend has never called me dearie before. We have pet names, sure, but they range from pumpkin, baby, to cupcake. Dearie sounds like something my grandmother would call me. I decide I'll get more information before I climb back into bed with a potentially possessed girlfriend. "Are you awake, sweetie?" No response. The eyes dart from me to the wall, to the door, and then the ceiling. I'm about to nope out of the room when her wide open eyes rolled to the back of her head. The white from those eyes stands out in the dim radiance of the booklight. No pupils in sight, she insists. Of course I'm awake, come back to bed, with a subtle tap of the fingers on the comforter. Looking at her fingers now, I'm starting to come around. She's never sleepwalked before, Surely she is awake now if she is moving her hands. But looking at her fingers, it is as though she is pretending to have control. They are all going in different directions, one finger pointing straight down and the others to the side. Those hands are not my girlfriend's hands. They are simulating normal movement as best they can, though. I say, "I'm going to get a drink of water, baby. Be right back. Can I get you anything?" Fully planning to run out of the house the moment I'm over the threshold. But my normally agreeable and sweet girlfriend decides I'm not allowed to leave. As serious as cancer, she says in that too deep horror voice, "Take one step out of that door and I will rip out your throat and shit down your neck." Shocked but understanding the importance of not letting this beast know I am in trouble, I reply, "As interesting as a proposition as that is, I think I'm going to..." And thinking quickly, I grab my water bottle from the nightstand. This doesn't please my girlfriend as she decides to start screaming and fingering her way towards me. It is a supernatural scream, so high-pitched and bird-like I feel as though my neighbors 3 houses down were going to ask us if they heard that last night. As fast as I can muster, I unscrew the lid and douse her in water, like I knew what I was doing. Her eyes close, her garbled appendages normalize, and she is back asleep. I'm going to sleep on the couch for a while, maybe forever. She'll understand when she's awake. Don't Google yourself. Why? Because you may not like what you find. One day, I was bored and decided to search for my own name on Google. I have quite a rare name, so I didn't expect to find many results. Imagine how surprised I was when I came across a website that had my full name in the domain, www.myname.com. When I clicked the link, it brought me to a message board. I looked at the profile of the website owner and found out that the person was the same age as me and had the same hobbies and interests. There weren't any posts on the message board, but I was intrigued, so I saved it in my favorites. It was about a month later when I went back to the website. This time, it had more content. There were some diary entries, mostly random things like, "The weather was nice today," or "I'm so bored in work," things of that nature. However, as time went on, I began to notice more and more coincidences. The person lived in the same city as I did. It struck me as rather strange that 2 people with the exact same rare name would be living in the same city at the same time. At one point, I noticed that the contents of the diary were quite similar to my own life. One day, I went to a baseball game, and when I checked the website that evening, I found that the owner of the site had gone to the same ball game. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, tens of thousands of people in the city supported the same baseball team. It began to seem like much more than a simple coincidence. Whenever I checked the website, I would notice little biographical details that seemed too close for comfort. For example, the owner mentioned their pet dog, and the dog's name was the same as the dog I had when I was a child. The website owner posted a picture of their car. It was the same model of car I had been driving when I was in college. They talked about eating at a certain restaurant. It was the same restaurant I had gone to all the time when I was working at my previous job. One day, when I looked at the message board, people had written messages to the owner saying, "Happy birthday." That day, it was my birthday as well. I decided to write on the message board for the first time, just out of curiosity. I was going to wish the owner a happy birthday and tell them we had the same name. However, when I tried to write something, I realized that there was nowhere to type your message. It wasn't a message board at all, just a static page. That's odd, I thought to myself. In other words, whoever owned the website had gone to a lot of trouble to make it seem as if it was an interactive site, as if there were other people posting on it, when in actual fact, all the content must have been created by the owner. Why on earth would someone do that, I wondered. I decided to send an email to the owner. It read, "Hi there. Believe it or not, we both share the same name. Nice to meet you." It was just a friendly email. The next day, when I tried to look at the website, I discovered that it was gone. It seemed like it had been deleted. Then I opened my mailbox. There was one reply. When I looked at it, a chill ran down my spine. It just read, "Found you.